Our next item, again, is a presentation that we sort of nodded to during our strategic plan overview. You know, one of our strategic plan goals is certainly focused on the recruitment and retention of a high-quality workforce. And so we promised you a more in-depth update on some of the efforts in that arena. And so we do have that presentation for you, and Mrs. Bolden, our Chief of Human Resources, is joined by Mrs. Jackson, and they're going to walk us through that presentation. Mrs. Bolden?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Board Chair Shea, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell.
I'm going to have you just get a little closer to the mic. We're not able to hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Board Chair Shea, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell. I am Francine Bolden, Chief Human Resources Officer, and with me today to share information regarding teacher recruitment and retention is Kenya Jackson, Talent Acquisition Ambassador. I'm going to make sure it... Doesn't that?
Please pardon our pause as we figure out how to make sure our presenters can advance the slides.
It shouldn't be. I think you took it out.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The January Destination 2025 Progress Update contained data pertaining to teacher and student demographics as well as teacher retention. We saw that teacher and student demographic data for school year 21-22 remains fairly consistent with our baseline data in 2018-19. While this data trend is reflective of national demographics, the school division is cognizant of the benefits of recruiting, retaining, and rewarding a diverse workforce, goals which are inherent in our strategic plan. The January update also conveyed a 91% teacher retention rate for 2021, which is a 2% increase from the baseline year. While this is an excellent retention rate, because Henrico is a large division, even single-digit turnover rates equate to triple-digit hiring needs. For the past several years, HCPS has been in need of an average of 400+ teachers to fill vacancies to begin each new school year. To provide context around the division's recruitment and retention efforts, it is helpful to share the backdrop against which this work is performed. To begin the 21-22 school year, there were in excess of 100 unfilled teaching vacancies in Henrico. At the same time, there were more than 1,000 vacancies or teacher vacancies across Virginia. While there are several reasons for this occurrence, the primary reason relates to the teacher pipeline. Traditionally, teachers enter the profession and the pipeline by completing a teacher preparation or prep program through a college or university. Nationally, however, enrollment in and completion of teacher prep programs has been on the decline for several years. As compared to the national level, Virginia has a higher number of individuals completing teacher prep programs, but has also experienced a steady decline since 2015. As we strive for diversity, one would expect teaching programs at Virginia historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, to be prime recruiting ground. Out of the 40 Virginia colleges and universities that offer teacher prep programs, 4 are HBCUs. Program completion at these institutions has declined by 46% since the 2011-2013 biennium, thus reducing the number of potential available teaching candidates of color produced in the Commonwealth. Similar trends are reflected on the national level. Based upon the latest available data in 2018-19, out of 10,447 individuals enrolled in Virginia prep programs, there were 3,167 teacher program completers. As can be seen here and preceding years, the number of program completers in our region, Region 1, would not be enough to fill all the annual Henrico vacancies, much less the Henrico vacancies plus those of the other school divisions within Region 1. As a result, it is imperative that HCPS is able to attract teachers that are new to the profession and those that are experienced in other divisions, as well as retain our own valued employees. How do we do this? First, we ensure that we have the infrastructure to support the work. Hiring a teacher is not a quick process. Each recommended candidate must be thoroughly vetted to ensure they meet the requirements to assume the responsibility for the education and well-being of our students. This includes application review, analysis of transcripts and licensure eligibility, reference checks, and criminal history checks. These are necessary, time-consuming, highly transactional processes that, when multiplied by an average of 400 teacher vacancies per year, leaves little room for strategic analysis to support recruitment and retention. Our school board recognized the infrastructure need, and in November, we were fortunate to hire Mrs. Kenya Jackson as a Division Talent Acquisition Ambassador. No one entity accomplishes this feat alone, however. In Henrico, a vast array of stakeholders work together to contribute to the recruitment and retention of a qualified, diverse workforce. Appreciation and credit are extended to all the entities who partner with us in this endeavor, from our school board and HCPS departments to external collaborators, such as Henrico County Government, the Henrico Education Foundation, and higher education institutions. The Talent Acquisition Ambassador's job is to ensure that all these collective efforts are synergized for optimum outcomes. Mrs. Jackson is charged with refocusing hiring and retention efforts through administering a formalized, research-based recruitment and retention program, which incorporates intentional data collection, analysis, and strategy development. And now Mrs. Jackson will share strategies and initiatives under development and current undertakings that support recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenya Jackson, and I am very honored to serve as Talent Acquisition Ambassador. In order to meet our recruitment and retention needs, the teacher pipeline must be strengthened. As we've just heard, many teacher prep programs are experiencing a decline in enrollment and program completers. An analysis of trend data indicates that more and more teachers are entering the profession in Henrico via an alternate route to licensure, through obtaining a provisional teaching license. In order to be eligible for a provisional teaching license, a candidate must currently hold a bachelor's degree and meet minimum prerequisites outlined by the Virginia Department of Education. Once hired by a school division, a provisionally licensed teacher must then complete required educational coursework as well as specific assessments within 3 years in order to obtain full licensure. Currently, there are 266 provisionally licensed teachers in our ranks and more recent hires that will be processed as provisionally licensed. Accordingly, HCPS has instituted several strategies that directly impact the teacher pipeline to include teacher residency programs, program cost deferral opportunities, coursework supports, and internal grow your own initiatives. Let's begin with a review of our teacher residency programs. Currently, HCPS partners with Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Richmond to cultivate teacher candidates through residency programs. Depending on the program, candidates either learn alongside district leaders for an entire year while earning a graduate degree, or participate in a year-long paid teacher residency program for career switchers that blends required course content with the practice of teaching. Residency participants become HCPS new hires upon completion of their program. These residencies provide on-the-job training for teacher candidates while they complete required coursework. The coursework provides comprehensive preparation that is key to success in the classroom and also fosters retention. Research shows, however, that the amount of debt that teachers accrue during their training can be a barrier to entry into the profession. To assist provisionally licensed teachers defray costs associated with teacher preparation, the division pursues grant opportunities, partners with colleges and universities, and provides HCPS-based direct support. For example, HCPS recently sought and was awarded a grant opportunity through the Virginia Department of Education to support 47 provisionally licensed teachers of color. As a part of the grant, we have partnered with VCU's Minority Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Equity Center to provide tutorial assistance for some of the common assessments which are mandatory to fulfill licensure requirements. The grant also allows the assessment fee to be paid for the 47 teachers, which averages about $130 per assessment. Highlighting just one of several university partnerships, the Departments of Human Resources, Professional Learning and Equity, Diversity and Opportunity are in collaboration with Virginia State University to offer provisionally licensed teachers a reduced rate for summer courses necessary to earn a full renewable teaching license. Turning inwardly, HCPS also has plans to implement its very own program to offer courses needed by provisionally licensed teachers to obtain full licensure free of charge. Currently, teachers must independently seek out their required courses and enroll in universities and programs to fulfill these requirements. With this plan, courses will be taught by our very own HCPS educators and tailored to reflect Henrico County's teaching philosophies and vetted pedagogical practices. By offering the required courses in Henrico County, our teachers will be provided with the convenience of learning from the division for which they serve. In addition, this cohort of classes will create an opportunity for our teachers to network and collaborate with fellow educators. Also in the vein of HCPS direct support, this fall, the maximum annual tuition reimbursement amount will be increased from $500 to $1,000 for our employees, and HCPS will pay the $50 licensure renewal fee for teachers. With regard to our Grow Your Own Teacher Pipeline efforts, we currently have in place Teachers for Tomorrow courses within several of our schools and our very own Teacher Scholars Program. Teachers for Tomorrow is a 36-week, one-credit course selected for students that explores hands-on learning, teaching, and the educational system. Students can complete observations and a teaching internship. The Teacher Scholars Program is designed to encourage and identify high school seniors who are interested in pursuing teaching careers and provide a guaranteed job position with HCPS in one of the identified critical shortage areas. Additionally, Mr. Mac Baton has envisioned for the division a teacher apprenticeship program. The program would provide high school students the opportunity to pursue specialized coursework to prepare them to enter the field of education. Students would begin taking dual enrollment courses their junior year that would count toward obtaining their degree in education. Through utilizing a youth apprenticeship model, students would be directly involved in a work-based learning program. The program would incorporate the key elements of the standard apprenticeship model, including paid workplace experience in education and related instruction. This program is currently under development. Innovative initiatives such as these are critical to infuse the teacher pipeline. Simultaneously, we must also be innovative with regard to our retention efforts. The prevailing research indicates that among other factors, salary and compensation and workplace supports are major drivers in retaining a diverse workforce. With regard to salary and compensation, you will also receive a presentation on the division's career ladder proposal. This is a monumental initiative in which HCPS will lead the way in providing staff a compensation structure that allows advancement along the salary scale while personalizing professional learning. We also know that teachers are more likely to be recruited and retained when salaries and other compensation is competitive. Thanks to the Henrico County Board and Board of Supervisors, HCPS teacher salary scales are competitive with or slightly higher than most of our local school division counterparts, and all teachers received at least a 6.9% salary increase in the spring of 2021. This fall, teachers with 10 or more years of service in the division also received between a 2.4 or 9.8 longevity pay adjustment. These efforts by our governing bodies positively impact the ability to recruit and retain a diverse workforce. In the vein of additional compensation, HCPS seeks out grant opportunities such as the STEM grant for our teachers. This grant is designed to recruit and retain individuals to teach science, technology, engineering, or mathematics in Virginia middle and high schools experiencing difficulty in recruiting qualified teachers. Eligible teachers receive a $5,000 incentive award after successful completion of the first, second, and third years of teaching STEM at hard-to-staff schools, with a written commitment to return to the same school division for the following school year. Recognizing the challenges staffing shortages have presented this year, structures have been created to additionally compensate teachers for covering classes during their planning period. Once hired, teachers must feel supported in order to sustain their employment. Accordingly, aligning with research, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Opportunity implemented staff affinity groups to assist with attracting diverse candidates, reducing turnover, and increasing employee morale. The purpose of the affinity groups revolves around the importance of inclusion and belonging as a way to connect staff with others in the professional community with a shared likeness. The groups promote for staff an established sense of self, confidence, and camaraderie. The groups also facilitate networking, mentorships, and other opportunities for professional and personal development. Another way to provide workplace supports is to assist with the workload. Teaching has always been a demanding profession. Currently, environmental and other factors contributing to staff shortages have compounded these demands, particularly in the substitute arena. To provide assistance, additional permanent substitute positions have been added to schools experiencing the highest unfilled substitute request rates. Central office staff have committed to working in schools to provide relief for unfilled sub-requests, and we have also been fortunate to have stakeholder partners, such as the University of Richmond and Henrico County government, volunteer to provide substitute coverage in our schools. The ability to fill these gaps for our teachers translates into a critical retention mechanism. A final critical component of teacher recruitment and retention is hiring management. The teaching profession is rapidly evolving. As a result, we must constantly assess our current policies, practices, and procedures to ensure that we are eliminating unnecessary barriers that may be influencing a teacher's attraction to or separation from Henrico County and/or the profession. It is our goal to strengthen hiring practices to ensure decisions are made as early as possible with the best candidate pool and based on the best information possible. To this end, several strategies have been developed around hiring management. In order to recruit effectively, you must know what you are recruiting for. Accordingly, collaboration between HR, the Department of Learning, the schools has occurred to streamline the timing of assessing student scheduling needs, which drive teacher needs. This earlier determination of student needs will allow earlier teacher-specific recruitment. Along the lines of needs identification, it is imperative to know a teacher's intent to remain with or separate from the division as soon as possible. To encourage expedited notification, the teacher intent form has been reinstated in an electronic format to allow teachers to quickly and easily relay this information to the Human Resources Department. A review of the teacher transfer process timelines is also being undertaken to ensure that we value current employees who wish to transfer within the division but do not incur opportunity losses with respect to solidifying external candidate hires. Additionally, the division job fair has been modified to provide a more convenient experience for candidates and administrators, and to provide administrators access to a greater number of qualified candidates. This week, we are hosting a division-wide virtual job fair. 384 eligible candidates have been invited to participate in a screening interview with numerous leaders serving as virtual interviewers. This recruitment effort offers convenience and flexibility for candidates to participate. In the past, teacher job fairs were hosted on Saturdays. With this new week-long virtual format, candidates have multiple options throughout the day and evening as well as Saturday to select a time that is convenient for them, and HCPS leaders have the ability to tailor their schedules based upon their availability. We also have been able to engage with viable candidates from other states. Lastly, the HR department is revising the candidate hire workflow design to eliminate bottlenecks and increase the timeliness of offers to candidates. There are many efforts being undertaken in our division in support of recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce. While only highlighting a few, we hope this presentation has provided insight into this multifaceted endeavor. At this time, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. And while as a board, we know all of our divisions, all of our different departments have had extraordinary challenges in the last 18 months. We know you, Ms. Bolden, your department has overcome so many obstacles, and you have done such a tremendous job as a leader of that department, helping us find and fill gaps. I just want to take a moment that we all truly appreciate you and all that your department has done. So thank you so much. Now we'll get into any comments or questions from our board members. Ms. Atkins, I will begin with you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Shea, and thank you so much for the presentation. A ton of hard work and intentional efforts really took place over a short period of time. And I want to thank you also for your intentional efforts of hiring Black leaders. I'm a firm believer when it comes to hiring practices to look at the top and look at that diversity at the top. And in Varina, Sanson, and Highland Springs, you've done an extraordinary job. So we have 14 schools, I'd like to say maybe 16 now that we have HVA, and then grad, and then also AVR, because I have a significant amount of students that come from my district that participate in those schools. So thinking about that and thinking about the 14, 15, 16 schools, 10 of those have Black principals. And I think that's extraordinary. And that shift happened in a very short period of time. And I know that was intentional efforts. In addition to that, in looking at schools here, I think I have, and I tried to kind of type it out during the presentation, and we have 7 males, 9 females in principal positions. And it's important to me to look at the leadership in the buildings and really understand that we know that students want to see themselves, but leadership and teachers also see themselves as students. And it's a great partnership in building trusting relationships. It does help to understand culture. So that's just a side note that I want to thank you for, that I want you to know that I noticed it. I know that it will continue, and it's going to filter down into teachers because you have folks at the table to help bring and with a lens to look for different levels of culture, different types of diversity. I do have a fair amount of questions, and so I'm going to try to cipher through those questions so that I can yield the floor to my colleagues who may also have questions as well. The first question that I'll start with is, during that interview process, can you help me understand how HR demonstrates the value of Black and Hispanic educators?
And I'll start, and you can shore me up.
Okay.
So from a very technical perspective, we always want to ensure that our interview panels are balanced with respect to diversity. And we also infuse within our interview questions that speak to diversity so that the candidate knows our expectations, and we can hear from the candidate their perspectives and what they would bring.
Yes, I would like to reiterate, it is very important that there is a diverse applicant and panel when selecting your interview panel. It's also important to ensure and to make sure that our administrators are aware, what are we looking for? What specifically are we looking for to fill? To make sure that the candidate represents the skill sets and not to include any type of interviewer biases that may be included in an interview. As Mrs. Bolden indicated, we infuse diversity and cultural related questions into our interview questions. For example, for our virtual job fair, every candidate, all 384 candidates were asked a question related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As an educator, how would you promote diversity, equity, and inclusion if you were selected as a teacher here in Henrico County? So while our applicant pools may not always be as diverse as we would like them to be, at least we are assessing a candidate's intentions and philosophies as it relates to this topic.
Thank you for that response. That addresses the candidate, in the process of understanding the intentions of the candidate, also understanding a little bit personality, a little bit of culture. I'm curious as to, on the opposite end, how do we on the opposite end, let's use the interview process, and that's what you were speaking to, how does the interviewer translate our value of Black educators and Hispanic educators to the candidate? Does that make sense?
Sure.
So that when you're asking the questions of that particular candidate, they understand how much we value diversity.
Yes.
So how do we get that message across to the candidate so that when they're responding, they are responding with an understanding of how much weight we place on diversity? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think as candidates are even reviewing our websites and reviewing the school's websites, there is a real focus and intention of diversity. How we brand Henrico County speaks to our level of commitment of how we celebrate diversity amongst our division. When we look amongst our leaders across our school board, and as you mentioned, we're trying to have an intentional effort to make sure that our leaders represent diversity. So when there are decisions to be made, our teachers and all of our employees understand that there is a variety of perspectives and opinions and, just beliefs so that we can incorporate those to trickle into our classrooms and into our schools. And eventually our students will, see that same effort. But I do believe that we celebrate diversity here in Henrico, and it's very much translated in all of our flyers. We are very intentional when we go to job fairs to make sure that our job fairs reflect diversity so that, there is a variety of males and females, Black and our white counterparts that are always with us to ensure that our candidates understand that this is something that we promote.
And we promote that very well through our strategic plan. And another strategy we use is for the schools to help us tell their story. What does your student population look like? What are the needs of your students? So that helps the candidate have a larger purview of what the expectations and what the needs are at each individual location.
I appreciate your responses because referrals are key in building the trusting relationships within the schools. And then if we have those trusting relationships, those individuals can share the stories with HR, with the recruiters, so that when they're in that interview process, you can share those stories and engage in a more courageous, in-depth conversation about whether it's race or cultures, et cetera, because we do an incredible job of trying to promote diversity. I think in our recruitment practices, I'll be honest, I think we have some ways to go. We're headed there, absolutely. And at the top of my statement was, I see it. I see it in my district, especially if I'm able to give you data points around it. It solidifies it. The other question I have is, if you could articulate to me what strategies we use to describe the state of needs for Black and Hispanic students. So when you're in that interview process or recruitment process, how do you describe that to the candidate?
And again, we rely on our principals and other specialists and other representatives of Henrico to help us tell the story. So who can best tell the story of what the needs are than a principal for his or her school? And so one strategy, again, is we rely very heavily on the schools to help us tell their story.
Do you have the principals in the interviews with you, or what does that look like?
Not every single interview. Yeah.
So for instance, for our virtual job fair, our interviewers were school administrators, assistant principals, curriculum specialists. Principals are typically, and administrators are typically the primary people in the interviews. And it would include department chairs and other teachers or people that would be relevant to making a solid selection for that school. And so as we, as HR specialists and the HR team are out promoting, it is important that we are attending the principals' meetings, that we are having those collaborative conversations, we're understanding what the needs are for the schools, so that when we are vetting and screening candidates to send to the schools, we have a strong understanding of what they would like to see at their schools.
And so I was going to say, and not every single interview, because as Kenya alluded to, many, many people recruit and interview for us and with us. So it's imperative that all of us have information about what the story is so that we can tell it.
And I think that's why it's so important to me that we start with the leadership, because principals are part of that interview process. They understand their schools, and when they're allowed to be a part of the process, they can be very selective in making sure that it's the right fit. I'll have two more questions and then I'll yield the floor, guys. So thank you for your patience. Let me get to. So one of the most common places for bias to sort of peek its ugly head is the criteria that's used to assess candidates. I was pleased to hear, though, some of the ways that you are going to review some of that criteria, as well as some changes that were mentioned during your presentation. I would also like to learn, and you don't have to do this in this moment unless you would like to, I would like to see the criteria used in evaluating a Black or Hispanic candidate. That's a loaded question. I don't expect for you to answer that in this moment. I would actually probably not to try, but I would like to see what that actually looks like at a later date, whether it's an email or a conversation. And then the last question is, do we offer a relocation stipend?
Do you want to take that one?
Not at this time. We do not offer relocation stipends. We have in the past. They did not yield the results that we were hoping for. We're always, exploring opportunities, but we at this time do not offer relocation stipends. One of the issues is that there's a very limited applicant pool, and our teachers are really in the driver's seat, especially if they're endorsed and they're strong, they're proficient. They're really in the driver's seat because all divisions are vetting the same candidate pool. And so it's important when we look at our efforts, we're looking very much so on recruitment, but more importantly, we're looking at retention. Once they're here, how do we keep them to stay? How do we keep them invested in the education profession? And most importantly, keeping them in Henrico County so that we can continue with that strong relationship and partnership.
I agree. Retention is key. However, if the effort is to increase the amount of Black and Hispanic, how do you get there?
Well,
So I think, when I'm thinking about some of the conversations that I've had, the reason I asked that question is because that came up. I would like to see an analysis of if you go back and look at some of the data points in history of when we offered relocation. I'd like to see the number of Black and Hispanic individuals, the pool that you had, and whether there was an increase. Now, they may not have been higher, but I'm interested in seeing if there was an increase, because understanding that in order to grow that particular demographic, relocation seems to be a bit of a topic, at least in the conversations that I've had. So I hear you, that it didn't yield the results. I do think a lot has changed since then. And, one of my goals certainly is to try to help Henrico County become even more diverse, particularly in my district. And one opportunity, again, I'd like for you to explore is looking at that relocation stipend and looking outside, especially if you're looking at historically Black colleges and universities. I think that's something that you may want to explore, again, to expand that pool of Black and Hispanic teachers. So, colleagues, thank you so much for your patience with my ton of questions. I didn't ask them all, but I know that this is not the time to do that. So, Chairwoman Shea, and thank you, ladies, so much for your responses.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Reverend Cooper?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So first and foremost, Ms. Bowden, I want to just kind of echo the sentiments of our chair, but I just want to kind of add a little bit to it myself. I want to thank you first and foremost and our HR department for creatively assessing and addressing the challenges that we face in recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce that reflects our student demographic, even in light of the competitive marketplace that we're in. So it's imperative, it's important that we acknowledge that. I am so happy to hear that we are, in essence, perpetually reviewing our policies, practices, and procedures to ensure that we are progressing and not regressing in our intentional efforts in recruiting and rewarding and retaining that diverse workforce. And I'm sure that in that process of evaluating our practices, policies, and procedures, that we're making sure that we are objective in light of how we interview, how we hire our potential employees. Also, I want to just say how appreciative I am of our intentional workplace supports, which are another way that we want to be the employer of choice for teaching professionals. So thank you for sharing that. The fact that we have a talent acquisition ambassador, I believe, says that this board and our superintendent and our HR department takes this work very seriously. I just think that the fact that Ms. Jackson is here in that role that she has says that speaks volumes to our intentional efforts to do that. I'm pleased also to see a higher retention rate from 18-19 as well as a lower turnover rate. So I think that's kudos to us. As far as the decline in National Teacher Program enrollment and completion, for reference, Virginia's public colleges enrollment since 2017 to 2021 has declined by 7%. And if we drill down even more macro to our HBCUs, we see the number of enrollment plus completion of the general programs, not just teaching, has been exacerbated as well, given that right now students are choosing some to go into the workforce at greater numbers than also going to college. So I think that we have to acknowledge that and speak to that. I'm hopeful that in the coming year and years, we'll see the success of Ms. Jackson's efforts as well as our entire HR department. Quick question, the teacher residency program, have we had any discussion as far as expansion to Virginia Union and Virginia State? I know that we have URVC, or just tell me what's the mindset of that with, those two schools, not inclusive of Virginia State and Virginia Union?
Well, the residency programs, as you mentioned, are currently with VCU and U of R. Virginia State is a very collaborative partner with HCPS. In fact, as referenced in the presentation, we are hoping to allow Virginia State to have reduced courses so that 100 seats will be available to our provisionally licensed candidates at a reduced rate so that they can obtain full licensure. So while the residencies, and the partnerships may not look the same, the connections for those partnerships related to those universities are definitely available, as well as Virginia Union. We are certainly in talks with Virginia Union. Dr. Monica Manns and I sit on their advisory board, and they are very in tune and would like to be supportive of how we can increase the applicant pipeline. As you referenced, the teacher prep programs are declining across all universities, but what is increasing is our number of provisionally licensed teachers. And I'm very happy to say that of our provisionally licensed teachers, about 50% of them are teachers of color. And so universities understand that we have to work collaboratively for this work and in supporting our provisionally licensed teachers, because until we can increase those teacher prep programs and increase the completion rate of the teacher prep programs, we really need to focus on how to support and encourage and really incentivize teachers to pursue that provisional licensure route.
No, I appreciate you giving a more detailed, descriptive answer in that, yes, VCU and University of Richmond have this program, but Virginia State, Virginia Union, our efforts are this, and I think that speaks volumes. I mean, Ms. Bolden's a Hampton graduate. You should go on down to Hampton and bring that a part of it too. No, but I say that I'm very serious because I think, Ms. Bolden, you and I had a conversation where you spoke about, our efforts to try to make students switch from other majors to education. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, and probably Kenya can speak a little bit better because she's,
Either one.
She's well versed on that side of the house with licensure and what have you. But sometimes, we often go to career fairs, not only for educators, but business and industry, because folks have degrees in other areas that for which we could obtain a provisional for them. And lots of times they have not even thought about teaching. And so we try to be very persuasive and try to figure out what motivates them, but to attract other folks to the profession outside of those who intentionally pursued a teaching track.
No, and because I've been drilling you for years about this topic, and you always shoot at me, the creative ways in which you and your staff are approaching this problem, not from a defeated perspective, but one in which we can make the headway. So thank you for just alluding to that. And the last statement I just want to make, hopefully the efforts with our intentional package as far as benefits and salary will help us to kind of create a combustible combination of, what we offer and how we treat our staff, in which we can get the candidates and keep them and reward them. So thank you both for your effort. Madam Chairwoman, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cooper. Ms. Agmer?
Thank you. It's such a wealth of information, first of all. We're probably all going to hit on something different. So I'd like to get, when we have time or when Mac is available to do it. Sorry, Mac, to put you on the spot. But the apprentice program, I love that idea, and growing our own. We've been doing this for a while with other efforts, but adding to that, I just think is wonderful. I know that years and years ago, we had a SOTA program where the high school kids could go into the elementary school and help them. They get an idea of what it's like when they're in high school to be teachers. I don't even, do we still do that? I'm just curious, because that could be on this list. The Virginia Teachers for Tomorrow program offers a similar experience.
Right,
And I just love the idea of introducing our high school students, middle school too, to the idea of become teachers one day, but growing our own, I think, is so important, because it is basically facing this head on, because you're right, we are competing with everyone to get our teachers. And if we're going to continue to attract qualified teachers who can meet our standards, do what we need them to do, handle the workload, handle all that we do ask our teachers to do, we have to present them with a quality work experience. Because at the end of the day, they need to be able to go home and go, I'm glad I did what I did today. And they need to feel good about the work that they're doing, but the work we're asking them to do. But you said two things that really resonated with me, that this is innovative and that we are leading the way, which I really like, that we are taking this proactive approach. We can't sit back, because then the teachers will go elsewhere. We have to create a place where they want to come. So in that vein, though, I like that we're looking at the career ladders. We're going to hear about that in a few minutes. That certainly with our recent pay raises and looking at compression, we do have competitive salaries. But I like the idea that we are giving teachers a way to reward innovation and self-improvement. I mean, because I remember when I was in the classroom, you felt like there was nowhere to go. You could become an administrator was about your only option. So self-improvement, wanting to hone your craft, so to speak, and being able to be rewarded for that, I think is not a lot of people doing that. And that's almost like the corporate world, which is, I think, one of the issues that education has always faced, is that in the corporate world, you're rewarded for improvement and we don't do that for our teachers. So I'm really glad to see it. So thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thank you, Ms. Agmer and Ms. Kinsella.
Yes, I couldn't be happier to see Ms. Jackson as well as you, Ms. Bolden, but newly hired back to Henrico, Ms. Jackson. And you have certainly been a valuable addition to the team, and we appreciate you. And just how you've just jumped right in, and appreciate this presentation. So much of the conversation, no one has yet discussed the burnout. Significant burnout, unparalleled. I don't know the same words we've been using, but burnout. And I know as we and others around the country try to resolve the staffing shortages, I'm just so worried about the future of education, specifically fall 2022 and beyond. Fewer folks are choosing education. Other businesses are actually hiring our educators away because they realize how wonderful educators are as employees. So that's troubling. I really appreciate the fact that you've changed. I think my colleagues have spoken to it. You've changed our strategy. One of the most valuable slides I saw when we first came on the board, I think Mrs. Shea and I went to Teachers for Tomorrow, and it was this red stop sign up on a slide. And it was like, because it's always done that way. And that's what they were teaching the students, that, always question that. So I applaud you, and that you are changing the way. Recruit, retain, and reward does not look the same. To that vein, you mentioned that we had done a survey, that you had brought it back. How many of our employees are unsure about returning, and how many are retiring? When will we have that data?
So we have that data now. 68% of our teachers completed that survey. And so this is really a snapshot in time for us to assess our teachers. Some of them already know that they're relocating, they're planning to retire. And this really prompted our teachers to be able to give us that data so that we can start strategizing with staffing needs. But we did have about a 68% return rate. And of that, 9.7% indicated that they were unsure of their plans at this time. 87% indicated that they plan to return. A little over 1% indicated that they were planning to resign and have submitted their resignations. And a little more than 1% indicated that they were retiring and notified us.
Okay. And we didn't ask for why, or?
We did.
Or is that as far as we went, just retire, resign, or did you find out the why?
The why in terms of resignations, we did find out the why. And the why for those, the top reasons were, at this time, they were unsure of their career plans. Another top reason was physical and mental health, relocation, family obligations, and accepted a position outside of education.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that information. Let's see. When I look at, or when I think about work, I think about being fulfilled. Are there growth opportunities? And career ladder is coming. Very excited about that. I think about management. I know our superintendent, division leadership, and the school board are committed. Do they have interesting work to do? With our students, they do. Have we asked our folks, our candidates, what they're looking for? Because there are folks that we're trying to recruit, and where you are in life may look a little bit different. Some folks are looking for the culture. Do we market our location? Henrico is a great place to live, work, play, and learn. The flexibility teachers may have, or anyone employed by us. Are we asking those questions of what the candidates are looking for? I know we know what we're looking for, but are we asking it of them?
Yes, we absolutely ask that of our candidates because, as you mentioned, we recognize that, eligible candidates have, options and opportunities to look within our division and look outside of our division and even look outside of education. And so we try to be extremely intentional to ensure that we are hearing what the candidate is looking for. Amongst our wonderful division, there's so much diversity, so many differences between schools, between levels, between content areas. Many of our candidates have multiple endorsement areas. And so we try to be as intentional as possible to ensure a good fit for the candidate and the school so that when they do enter into that new position, they're happy and they want to stay, which will only support the school.
Well, and as my colleagues have already said, and I'm certain we all support, we are an increasingly diverse division and community. So it goes without saying, we appreciate you recruiting a workforce that looks like the community in which we live, work, play, and learn. So thank you there. Are we just thinking outside, just different things that make Henrico different as an employer? Are we using employee testimonials? I know Ms. Atkins mentioned a relocation package, but I'm more interested in referral bonuses for our current employees. I know that during our bus driver shortages, we've paid bonuses to our bus drivers for referrals. I think we need some referral bonuses for our educators.
I smile because that's one of the things Mrs. Jackson has asked for as well.
Yes, I feel like, I just have to say, I thank our teachers tremendously for the hard work that they do. And these past 2 years have been extremely unprecedented. And we are very, very thankful for all of the work. And they are our biggest recruiters. When they are happy in their division, they will share with their friends and their colleagues from other divisions, or perhaps they're the eyes and ears as well to help us find the candidates. So yes, Mrs. Bolden and I have been in conversation about that.
I'm very excited to hear about that. And then recently, our Board of Supervisor counterparts gave a real estate tax credit. Are we looking at anything, some of the largest expenditures? I was glad to hear that we're paying fees for provisional licensures and trying to help the financial side of an education. But are we talking other creative ideas, for example, housing, any kind of other support from living in Henrico County? Are you guys speaking to HR on the government side, or Dr. Cashwell? Are there any conversations to where maybe we can support our employees in a different way in Henrico County?
Yes, I'll answer at a high level, and if you have more details, please add. But, absolutely, when you think about how can we do things differently, lots of conversations taking place about that, and thinking about, the question asked about relocation bonuses. If it isn't that, how do we create a situation that attracts individuals who may have to make a move to want to join the area, not just because of the quality of life, but what makes sense financially. So we can be a competitive pay leader, and we are, but things like, affordable housing, getting set up with checking accounts and banking, thinking about Henrico Federal Credit Union, discounts maybe related to any utility setup fees and those kinds of things. You mentioned personal property tax. I think there's a lot we can explore, particularly with our general government counterparts, with some partners like the Henrico Federal Credit Union, and making an attractive proposition for individuals who may relocate to, or just be starting out, graduating from college with their first place, their first job, those kinds of things. How can we just support that endeavor? So I think there are lots of conversations about what could be. And if I've missed something, please feel free to add to it.
No. Okay, I would just like to encourage those conversations. Let them continue as a way in Henrico County we can continue to set ourselves apart from other localities, especially since employees, because we are so close to other localities, sometimes they leave us for another locality, or another locality's employees come to us, but just other ways we can set ourselves aside. Love the apprenticeship program. I am just not surprised Mr. Baton has created it. When do we expect it to begin? And how soon would we benefit from it?
It's definitely in the early stages, and so I had the pleasure and honor of attending some meetings early on with MAC and partners at the university level. So this will take cooperation not only at the community college level, but with our four-year colleges, in creating a pathway similar to our ACAs, where students would be, while they're enrolled in school, earning an associate's degree and then finishing up those credentials at a four-year institution. So it's definitely something that's in the works but not formalized yet, and we'll share more once it is.
Okay, thank you. And then in our additional compensation, the grant opportunities, hearing from other teachers over the years when their grant compensation expired, is there any discussion of replacement of those funds? Because when you're talking $5,000, teachers miss that. Just, if the answer is it's on the list, that's a great answer, but just to put it out there that when those grants expire, oftentimes teachers miss that $5,000.
Certainly, and we can explore that.
Okay, and then heard a lot about substitutes and the lack thereof. So just, I guess that's probably more budget related, but it is recruit, retain, reward, because the fewer substitutes we have, the greater the workload on everyone else in the building. And then I'm just going to close by kind of giving it to Mrs. Shea. She had a great job share idea that she brought up. Marcy, I don't even know, in the past year or two, but you go ahead and talk about that. And thank you again for all your work, really.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsella. Redirect to Ms. Ogburn.
Absolutely, thank you. Just real quick, I wanted to follow up on something Mrs. Kinsella said, the why that people are leaving. I would love to get more information on that. Basically, what can we do to solve some of the whys? Because I've had some teachers over the years just say discipline is an issue, that they just get to the point where they just can't deal with the behavior problems anymore, for example, or there's, too much on their plate, whatever it is. I would really love to have some way that we can look at the whys, and maybe y'all could share that with us, because if there's something we can do about those, I think that would be very targeted work. I'm assuming y'all look at it and you know all the whys and you've shared some of those with us, but I just think that would be really good information for us to have.
Not only can we follow up related to Henrico's specific information, but we can also share with the board, something we're mindful of. There's a pretty significant body of research related to the teaching profession in general and those questions. And I think some of them wouldn't be specific to the district, but, things related to the profession in general and the changing nature of the responsibilities that come along with the teaching profession. And as I said, that body of research and work is evolving, and I think something we also stay tuned to. And so I think we can look at sharing both, and where are there areas where we see our ability to make an impact, and then are there things beyond that that we should just be mindful of, even if they're outside of our control. There are additional things we can do to sort of soften the impact of some of the challenges that come with the role.
Well, and like one of my colleagues said, is just because it's always been done a certain way, maybe we're the ones who change it. And so some of those whys, giving that feedback to us, I think would be great. But also, if you could at some point give us some information, this is just like sharing an email, whatever. How many of our employees that are leaving are going into the prep program and how many are opting out? I'm curious if our prep program is still as an attractive benefit that as we think it is, and I'm just a little feedback on that would be great.
We'll get back to you on that. And I would say, just sort of nodding back to the body of work and research related to factors that retain individuals in the teaching profession. And that has everything to do with the presentation you're about to see next. And that is the opportunity to advance and grow professionally and receive compensation. And I think you mentioned just, your own personal perspective as an educator, thinking of what does it look like to grow professionally, advance, to find fulfillment in that area that doesn't necessarily mean taking an administrative route. And so I think you'll see that the latter and some plans we have moving forward to really personalize the experience for employees and meet their individual needs is one way of us doing things really differently to get to one of those core reasons we see people indicating a lack of satisfaction with the profession or eventually their intent to leave.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for this presentation. More than a couple of thoughts for me. But when we look at recruiting, I loved so many things that y'all had to say, particularly around the work-based learning opportunity being grown and our Teachers for Tomorrow. I think it's so important to get students who are interested in teaching in the classroom early, and I think that's a big gap in our teacher preparation programs at the post-secondary level. Is often students don't get into the classroom until their very last semester, their very last 2 semesters when they've already committed, and there's no better way to know if your passion is being in the classroom than being in the classroom. And so these opportunities for our students to get into the classrooms early, I think is just so critical in terms of growing teachers that are truly passionate about the work. And so I'm excited to see some expansion there. And our Teacher Scholars program is incredible. One of our first-year teachers at one of my schools is a product of that. And he is maybe the most dynamic first-year teacher I have ever seen. He invites me in regularly to co-teach with him, which is just like, so amazing. I've learned so much good math pedagogy from him and being with our students, and to see a first year teacher with that kind of confidence and that kind of just dynamic, in Henrico we grow the best, so let's keep them. And I think your questions and your probing into what are the barriers of entry for candidates into the field of education, I think that's spot on, because this is not just a Henrico problem. This is a national problem. And like you said, we're fighting for the same finite small group of passionately qualified candidates. And so we want to grow that pool, not just for us, but for everyone. And so looking at what are those barriers, how can we use our voices as a division, both working with post-secondary and perhaps, legislation and changing the larger conversation, how can we remove those barriers? I think is going to be essential to the future of education, as Ms. Kinsella put it out, not just for fall 2022, but as we go forward, for the long haul, on who's going to be in the classroom to teach our students. It's of critical importance, and so I appreciate y'all asking that question. When we look at retaining our teachers, I think the majority of teachers, not just in Henrico, but nationally, while salary can be a challenge, and our Board of Supervisors really has gone above and beyond trying to keep us competitive in the career ladders and that sort of thing, and as well as I'm hoping that these state budget supports are going to come through. And so, we're doing all we can in terms of salary. It's really the quality of life that causes most educators to leave the field. It's that burnout. It's that work-life balance. And so I appreciated seeing the supports that we're putting in place in the building. I think along with that goes being really intentional about vetting initiatives, instructional initiatives that come through, which I know Dr. Hughes and Dr. Cashwell and their team, they've been really trying to be intentional about vetting and developing before the rollout, so it's not initiative after initiative. But that makes a difference for teachers, right? That makes a difference in terms of retaining. Also, real careful consideration about responsibilities beyond instruction. And I think while subs have been a challenge, to say the least, this year, the piece about compensating teachers for when they have to, I think that goes a long way, for us to say this wasn't our intention for you to lose your planning period, but we respect the fact that you have a planning period and we're going to compensate you for losing that. I think that goes a long way. Our goal is for everyone to have a planning period every day, right? But when we can't, acknowledging that, right, and owning that, I think is so important. And then I think a third level that's really been highlighted in the last 12 to 18 months is respect. And I think that has been so hard for our educators. And I will say at every opportunity I get to, our educators are skilled professionals, period. And that is not said enough. I think the community rhetoric is really hard for all of our educational professionals right now. I've heard from a lot of our secondary teachers how that has overflowed into student attitudes inside the building, and for them, that is the straw that's breaking the camel's back, right? All the stuff they can't control outside of the classroom, they're used to closing their door and engaging and having dynamic classes with their students. And when they lose that piece, they're losing their passion and they're losing their love for what they do. And so I think this respect piece, and then along with, you know, some of the state initiatives that just do not bolster up the fact that our educators are professionals. I think all of that coming together right now is just so hard. And I don't know what the answer, particularly to that last piece is, but I think we have to acknowledge it, right? I think we have to acknowledge that, and as much as we can with our compensation and our rhetoric within inside of Henrico, build up our teachers and say, you are appreciated and you are a professional and you are the boots on the ground and the hands of our school division and you are doing the work every day. I don't know. I can't say that enough. So, a couple questions around, we talked about affinity groups. You mentioned in terms of being really rooted in the spirit of inclusion and belonging. I know some constituents in my district have brought questions up about that in the last year. And so for the sake of clarity, so that everyone understands what this is, I just have a couple of questions. First of all, is it required for staff to participate in affinity groups?
No, it is not.
No. Okay, so for those who couldn't hear Ms. Bolden, it is not required.
It is not required.
Not required to participate in affinity groups. Are affinity groups exclusively available to staff members of a certain race or religion?
No, anyone who is interested may participate in an affinity group.
Okay, so for those of you who couldn't hear, anyone may participate in an affinity group. And so I just wanted to provide our constituents some clarity around that. I think there's been a lot of confusion about what that specifically means. And so I think for the broader audience to understand that they are voluntary and that anyone can participate in any of the affinity groups is important to understand. So thank you so much. And then since Ms. Kinsella teed me up so nicely, I appreciate that. I'll just put a plug in for my passion for job sharing. I think that so often that first bubble of burnout that hits our young teachers, often it aligns with when they're growing their family. And so if it is an option, often teachers, and especially those like 150% all-in teachers, right? You know what I'm talking about. They often opt to stay home with their family, but they're still passionate about students and education. We talked about that work-life balance. They just can't make those two meet. And I'll wholeheartedly admit I was one of those people, which is kind of where my passion from this comes from. And I think if we can look into opportunities to job share, particularly, it's a little bit challenging at the elementary to kind of envision what that would look like, but particularly at the secondary level where schedules could be easily kind of sliced, not easily, but more easily sliced and diced. I think we could retain a lot of those teachers. Particularly, one of my high schools just got this extraordinary mid-year hire for a part-time position. And it's because it was a part-time position that she was able to, we had lost her a couple years ago and it ended up to be a part-time position, so she picked it back. And I mean, the difference in the students, and they just totally thriving, extraordinary. And so I think if we could, I know the infrastructure there is tricky to set up, but if we could explore that, I think not only would we retain those extraordinary educators for while they're part-time, but I think then we also stand the chance of them growing back to full-time, after a season of life. And so we just, we got to think outside the box, but, not only was that my personal experience, I've seen it firsthand now in some of my schools, being able to pull teachers recently back as part-time that we wouldn't have gotten back full-time, and just the difference I made. So thank you for teaming me up. Thank you for listening to my crazy ideas. And I'll just close in saying, I was one of those hires at one of those Henrico job fairs where everybody goes, and I remember coming home for the weekend to stay with my mama, which she loved. And to the point of trying to recruit out of state, I think thinking outside the box and have it virtually, like what a great idea. Way to expand our pool for people who might not already have ties to Henrico, but are looking for a great place to live, work, play, and learn. And so kudos to you all. So that is all for me. Thank you so much.
Chairwoman Shea, I did have one more comment, if
absolutely.
that's all right. One other thought that I had as we're looking into this particular topic is getting some level of a legislative update. I know there are a few bills that will impact things like recruitment, pay, licensure. I think it might be wise to get a legislative update right now. I know crossover, what's the date? I believe crossover happened on the 15th. So that session should be ending, or we will end it, I would say probably by March 14th or 15th. So if possible, I think it would be wise to get some level of an update on what has passed that may impact these ladies' efforts in Henrico County as a whole.
Yep, we'll keep you posted as that unfolds.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you again to our presenters, Francine Bolden and Kenya Jackson, for that very comprehensive presentation. And I think they noted at the end, this doesn't represent all of their efforts, just a fraction. So we could spend a week on this topic. Their passion, enthusiasm, and dedication to this is really unparalleled.